So this is my review of my Pulsar NS200. I first passed my 2B license in December 2020 and I got my very own Pulsar NS200 2 weeks later after researching multiple brands and models. This is the 2016 model. I got it secondhand. In fact, I'm actually the 5th owner already. So I've been riding her for about 8 months now and I've put in about 10,000 kilometers. This bike cost me about 6,000 for 6 years of COE remaining. Some brief specifications about this bike. It features a 4-stroke single-cylinder liquid-cooled engine and packs 199.5cc. It provides 23.5 horsepower at 9,500 RPM. It has a 6-speed manual transmission and is manufactured by Bajaj in India. So yes, it's an Indian bike. The NS in NS200 stands for Naked Sports. Aesthetic wise, this bike looks good for a street bike, and many have said that it looks like the FZ16. It has a good balance between aggressive looking and comfort. This colour is actually not an original. One of the previous owners sprayed it blue, and one of my friends actually gave her the name Sonic. In the past, Pulsar actually features an iconic yellow colour. However, in recent years, they have discontinued it, and in 2021, they actually focus on more modern and classic colours. The plastic panels have a sharp and sleek look, although I have to mention that this particular fuel tank was changed by the previous owner after an accident. And in my opinion, the front of the bike actually looks a lot like a Hornet, very aggressive. The curb weight of the Pulsar NS200 is about 145 kg, which is very comparable to bikes of its class of the R15 and the KTM Duke. It features an underbelly exhaust which is hidden below the frame of the bike, unlike the conventional side exhaust. Some people like it, some people don't, so it's really up to you. The Pulsar NS200 has a 100mm front tyre and a 130mm rear tyre. I'm currently using Bridgestone PT39 tyres. My recommendation will be to always swap out the original stock tyres, because most online reviews are that the original stock tyres are not grippy, especially in wet weather. The recommended tyre pressure is 25 psi front and 28 rear. However, I personally prefer 26 front and 30 rear. The switches on the NS200 are very simple and very basic. We have the high beam, signal, horn, kill switch and ignition. For those of you who are curious, the box on the left is actually a IU unit used in Singapore for parking purposes. The mirrors here are actually the stock mirrors. They are big and bulky. The previous owner actually had racing mirrors, but that gave me no confidence, especially on the roads of Singapore. The dashboard of the NS200, when you on, there's a very satisfying electronic sound. On the left, we actually have all the warning symbols and whatnot. The blue symbol at the bottom is actually Bajaj signal, and I thought it was something was wrong with the bike at first. In the center, we have the fuel gauge and the rev gauge, and on the right, we have the speedometer and odometer, and as well as the time, which is not very accurate as it runs after some time. There is also a spana icon that appears every now and then. That's actually to indicate that your bike is for servicing. It appears every 5 kilometers after your initial 15,000 kilometers. She has a basic side stand that also serves as an auto kill switch when it's down. That's a safety feature to prevent you from moving off while your side stand is down. There is also a main stand option that can be installed on the bike. The headlights are halogen headlamps, which is the bare minimum, and it's not very bright in my opinion. You have the option to change to LED, but I'm not sure if it's legal in Singapore. Signal lights are visible, and there's a nice simple design on the rear lights. The rear box installed on my bike is actually done at the Universal Motors. It cost me about 200 plus, including installation. There's a Kappa 46 litre box that can fit 2 helmets, including a full face, and still have some space for my raincoat. Now, it's time for the performance review of the bike. This bike is 189.5cc, which is the highest in 2B context in Singapore. The rev rate lines at about 9,500 RPM. The NS200 is actually a very rev happy bike and likes to be in the high RPM. Less than 6,000 RPM, the engine sounds very sluggish. The engine really comes to life at about 6,000 to 8,000 RPM. The acceleration is quite good. At the stoplight when moving off, I'm usually the first few. Otherwise, I will catch up with the other bikes eventually. Engine jerk is very minimum. I can maintain very comfortably at 90 to 100 km per hour at about 6th gear at 7,000 RPM. The top speed of this bike is about 145 km per hour, but personally I'm a bit heavier, so I've only reached about 130 km per hour. Getting into first gear is always very satisfying, and getting it back to neutral is no problem as well. It's very easy to find. I've only experienced force neutral about twice in 8 months. The exhaust sound is rather boring and not very exciting. The unique selling point of the Pulsar NS200 is that it has a triple spark plug that theoretically leads to cleaner combustion. Handling wise, I would say that this bike is a well handling naked bike. There is agile, can lane split with no problems, and usually I'm able to U-turn within 1.5 lanes at the traffic light. Fuel economy is at about 36 km per litre. Fuel tank is about 12 litres with 2 litres of reserve. And this bike is actually the fuel injector variant. The bike actually comes with the stock Bybri brake caliper that is made by Brembo. It has a 280mm disc up front and 230mm at rear. Features a better disc floating caliper, and I would say that the braking is good. It has saved me a few times. The rear wheel locking up is actually quite dangerous and can result in a high slide, so I do not recommend. I'm only doing it because I'm confident and I'm comfortable with the bike. The front wheel never locked up on me before, and it really depends on how you brake. Only the models after 2017 have ABS on them. Mine is a 2016 model, so there is no ABS. Suspension wise, it has a telescopic front fork and adjustable nitrox monoshock rear suspension. So I would say that the suspension is actually rather stiff and I can feel most of the bumps on the road. Horn is audible, but I would have preferred it to be louder. On the comfort aspect of the bike actually has a very upright sitting posture that doesn't give you any back pain. It has a good knee recess, and vibration on the bike is actually very tolerable. However, it's a bit higher at lower RPMs. Initially, in the first few weeks, I couldn't really get used to it and my hands would get numb. However, now I don't feel it anymore. I will usually rest my feet fully on the back at cruising speed rather than covering the brake lever. This is more comfortable for me. The seat is soft enough and I don't really have much to complain. Rear seat and pegs are comfortable as well. I usually service this bike at Universal Motors near Queensway Shopping Centre because Universal Motors is actually the sole official agent of Bajaj, and they have both showroom and workshop, so call them at the correct number. I feel that I really trust them and they know what they are doing because they deal with Pulsar so much. The salesmen there are relatively friendly as well. What I've noticed is that other workshops in Singapore don't really like to work on Pulsar because the market is solely controlled by UM and the parts are not very common, like the fork seal. This girl uses 1.2 litre of engine oil, and that costs about $28 at UM and is recommended every 3,000 kilometers to service. Oil filter is recommended every alternate servicing and costs about $10. And also remember to do your basic chain maintenance. So there are only two major issues since I had it for 8 months. One is that the fork seal was leaking at the very start, and that cost me about $180. I did it at another workshop, but can get it cheaper at UM. And second issue was my rear brake caliper got stuck, so I had to drag my rear brake all the way home, and that cost me about $60 at UM to replace. So other than that, everything else has been fine. The engine has been fine, and it's a relatively reliable bike. So overall, the Pulsar NS200 is actually a very cost-effective bike. It has good power and performance, looks refined although it's not a head turner, and I would definitely recommend it as a good first bike and daily rider.